Hi, and thank you for joining me from wherever you may find yourself in the world. And thank you to the organizers of the 2024 virtual conference of the Journal of Literacy Innovation. This year's theme is Inclusive Literacy Instruction. My name is Dr. Johari Murray from the Universidad Nacional de Educación a Distancia in Madrid, Spain. I'm originally from the United States. However, for quite some years, I've been working in the European context. I say this as to help frame a slightly nuanced layer of understanding as we move forward. In this presentation, we are looking at three big concepts. They are inclusive literacy instruction, transnational teaching of English, and imparting critical stances in children's literature. I take these three concepts and propose their strategic insertion to feature in core curriculums for teacher preparation in this presentation titled An Argument for Inclusive Literacy Instruction in Spanish Universities for Future Teachers of English as a Foreign Language and its Literatures. Yes, that's a mouthful. So let me explain in short terms our contextual starting point. Teacher training programs here in Spain have so much to offer. Among the several available options, there are many people who decide to study to become English teachers. These students train to eventually earn a position as a primary or secondary teacher. In the United States, we would be talking about K through 6 or 7 through 12. However, now, if we take a step back, observe all the increased and sustained global movements fueled by various push and pull conditions, the modern classroom, be it in New York, Paris, or Madrid, does not look like the mid-20th century classroom after 2 world wars. Home fronts have shifted, technology has disrupted, and identities are being negotiated and challenged. For students and teachers in the classroom, there needs to be multiple means of humanizing knowledge and communicating across differences. Inclusive literacy instruction is based on accessibility, adaptation, and accountability across reading and writing differences. Transnational teaching of English communicates multiple understandings of language learning. Critical stances in children's literature are much needed, hopeful, and transformative approaches to harmonize inclusive, transnational English language learning. Children's and young adult literature have embedded these kinds of opportunities. Given the interdisciplinary nature of children's and young adults' literature, teacher preparation programs from around the world hold the potential to offer pragmatic solutions and transformative insights for inclusive literacy instruction in English language learning. The goal to train future teachers of English languages for primary school needs transnational perspectives to better enrich inclusive literacy instruction and inform critical narratives of storytelling. In this talk, I invite you as adult stakeholders in positions of power, influence, or both to accompany me in the next few minutes to engage with and unveil complex webs of knowledge or ways of knowing that move around in societies and the kinds of negotiations that take place through and within formal and imagined borders. These formal and informal epistemologies meet at the various junctures provided by inclusive literacy instruction, transnational teaching of English, and imparting critical stances in children's literature. For this micro-study, 2 large public universities from Spain's capital have been selected: the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid and the Universidad Complutense Madrid. But before we move into greater detail, let's take a general overview. I'm using the theoretical framework of third space. The methods used are critical qualitative analysis. Our objective is to engage in comprehensive examinations that show how 2 large public Spanish universities have opportunities to fill in unsuspecting gaps in their teacher preparation programs, as I argue for the incorporation of inclusive literacy instruction, transnational teaching of English, and imparting critical stances in children's literature. The key question, therefore, is how can future teachers of English and its literature be trained from transnational perspectives to better enrich inclusive literacy instruction and inform critical thinking practices? This research question is sustained by the underlying premise that given the interdisciplinary nature of teacher training programs from around the world, there is the potential to offer pragmatic solutions, transformative insights, and comprehensive approaches in courses that combine inclusive literacy instruction with transnational English and critical stances in children's literature. As we look at the 3 big concepts, inclusive literacy instruction, transnational teaching of English, and critical stances in children's literature in the context of Spanish universities' teacher preparation programs, we need to have a clear idea of the theoretical frame that guides this work. Third space, although considered a high theory, touches upon not only postmodern analysis or decolonial dismantling of power imbalances, it concerns itself with the in-between thresholds of organic, moving encounters of the everyday. As Roundtree and Shirazadian state, third space, number 1, accounts for the multiple factors contributing to teacher learning identity formation and meaning making in community literacy spaces. 2, it recognizes and thinks strategically about differential power dynamics in complex and ever-changing teacher-learning ecologies. And 3, it imagines itself as always already a theory in practice. Inclusive literacy instruction is part of a constantly emerging teacher learning ecology led by strategic affordances of accessibility, adaptation, and shared accountability. English is recognized as a dominant world language and presents complex identities and knowledge formations transnationally that must be always challenged. Critical stances in children's literature as a major constituent of community literacy spaces encourages us to explore what it means to bring the full potential of our students and ourselves. Third space reminds us that actively connecting with and stimulating potentialities is never power neutral. Teachers and students are always negotiating different histories, epistemologies, and positionalities. These negotiations must be done with care, agility, and reflections. Scholars such as Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Gayatri Spivak, Gloria Asandua, and Bell Hooks champion this position of liminality and the radical challenge to think differently. Third space theory amalgamates and goes beyond literacy instruction through language comprehension, word recognition, and decoding words. It includes the crucial interactions among multi-dimensional people. What emerges is something different, something familiar, and something completely new and still ever-changing. Teachers in training at Spanish universities and programs for future teachers of English must embrace the bobbing roundness of converging, diverging, and emerging ontological varieties that constitute formal and informal epistemological discourses of inclusion, literature, language, and literacy. In discussing critical research methodologies, we know that they are a collection of tools and specific processes that reinforce critical stances and implicate larger sociocultural constructions and socio-historical norms. For example, language ideologies that are faithful to the colonial project are disrupted, resisted, and disengaged. Their doctrines of the inherent representational manifestations of power, beauty, and expressiveness are recoded. Another example of critical methodology would be Hollandale's 3 levels of ideology in children's literature that question the author's deep message in a text, the author's unexamined assumptions, and the ideologies of the author's world. Critical methodology begins with attention. It localizes overt and covert power distributions. The teacher or researcher must fully situate herself within the immediate reality and make connections without essentializing discourses in order to speak truth to power and to center the voices of marginalized, disenfranchised, or oppressed collectives along with their histories, conditions, and global connections. The literature on inclusive literacy instruction prioritizes the deliberate cultivation of welcoming atmospheres, collaborative approaches, and a we're all in this together and we can thrive spirit. It overlaps with special education, critical race theory, and English as a foreign language, just to name a few. Inclusive literacy instruction, by its very nature, is interdisciplinary and intersectional, so that in ideal conditions, students are centered and progress is reviewed over performance. Although these are both important metrics and benchmarks. Accessibility, adaptation, and accountability deal with the preparation of the learning spaces in a way that accommodates and supports the diverse needs of all learners. We know students come to their learning environments with diverse backgrounds, spectrums of abilities, and differences that may be invisible or not. Inclusive literacy instruction emphasizes cultivating a classroom culture where every student feels valued, respected, and capable of achieving success in reading and writing. To ensure that all students have equitable access, it is culturally responsive teaching that depends on the multifaceted collaborations as well as community outreach and involvement in a variety of teaching and learning materials. Prestigious universities such as Cornell, Dartmouth, Michigan, and Stanford, among many others, have their own dedicated research and resource centers. Universidad Autónoma de Madrid and Universidad Complutense de Madrid are well positioned to create similar opportunities in their programs for future teachers of English languages in primary school. Researchers grapple with definitions and methods of transnational teaching of English because it can be understood in so many different ways. The teaching of English is an expansive international phenomenon that has complicated, interwoven language ideologies. The connections made between English language use and social perceptions of being reverberate with hierarchical allegories of resistance that reside in spaces of tension. Raj Katru's 1985 model of English is designed with 3 concentric circles describing who and how English is used around the world. This model identifies the outermost space as where the majority of countries in the world are learning English. It is the largest and fastest growing population of English language users. Third space as a critical theory framework backs notions of inclusive, pluralistic, differentiated, and socially realistic views of English language instruction. The smallest innermost circle indicates native English users. This model does not specify the social cultural grouping nor accents, but rather the key geographic areas. English is a very richly varied language that offers unique linguistic flexibilities transnationally. As such, attention to English varieties are useful in training future teachers as they negotiate the hidden and obvious power dynamics of the English language. It is generally agreed that imparting critical stances in children's literature, as explained by Roberta Linder and Francine Falk-Ross, that it involves an understanding that power can be subtle, all texts are biased, and that teachers and students can respond by reflecting, being transformed, or by taking action. They affirm that it is therefore important that pre-service teachers be prepared to negotiate critical literacies with young children, especially those from underrepresented groups. Critical literacy stances may have different approaches to address evolving attitudes toward cultural and linguistic differences, or to map the ecology and production from children's literature, not only from a scholarly
multimodal artifacts, but also multifaceted cultural commodities that are present in the classroom.